This is big. This is really big.
Hello, FOF. This is FOF Live presented by La Pop. As always, you can check them out on Instagram, Twitter, and their Doral location. Before we get everything started, let me introduce the round table. I'm your host, Daniel. We have Eli Sussman, and we have the two best interns in all of baseball, Nick, and we have Mike Anthony. Guys, how you feeling to talk about this series coming up against the Nats?
You're so sweet, Daniel. We'll see. Hopefully play the Nationals good. We'll see.
Make or break series right here.
Yeah. We all remember last time they played the Nationals was at home. They lost 2 out of 3. Not great from the Marlins. That's one bad thing that happened this week. And another one happened just a few hours ago with the waiver claims. The Angels had a garage sale. Ronaldo Lopez, Lucas Giolito, Matt Moore, Randall Grichuk, Hunter Renfroe, and more players from other teams. The Marlins were interested in Giolito, Lopez, Moore, put a claim on all of them, almost all the pitchers, and they all ended up going to the same team, the Cleveland Guardians. The Marlins, as it says, they're whiffed on the waiver claims, got no one, put waivers, and got absolutely no one. Eli, what are your first thoughts when you see these 3 players? You know, they got claimed, but they're all going to the same place.
Yeah, was a very unique situation, and we knew that coming in. But I think the one wrinkle we didn't foresee so much is that the Guardians would actually be in it. Like, I think a lot of analysts and experts were on the same page. That the Marlins seemed, when you looked at the order, I can throw up the waiver claim order real quick for people to take a look at. It was an order of ascending winning percentage, so the worst teams pick first. And I think a lot of people thought the Marlins at number 14, like they were going to be the first contending team that would try to pick up pending free agents. They didn't think that any of the other teams above them in the order would actually like do this. And for the Guardians to not just get one, but all 3 and the contracts associated with all 3, this is a team that is run just as cheaply, if not even more cheaply than the Marlins are. This is kind of out of character for them to do that. And weirdly enough, they're also a team where I think you look at their roster and how they're performing, and their biggest deficiency is offense, not pitching. So this was a really big shocker that they wanted pitching this badly, considering that they're 5 games out of their own division this late into the season, and that they're totally out of the wild card race in the American League. So the Marlins tried, and I think the Marlins, now they know more than we do. They were probably more aware than us that Cleveland was a threat here, but they understandably didn't think that all 3 of those pitchers, going back to them, Giolito, Matt Moore, Reynaldo Lopez, and all 3 of them would be picked up by the Guardians. They put in claims for them per multiple reports. They were ready to accept these guys as well if they got through, and none of them did, unfortunately. So we could talk about it in a moment on the hitting side. Like, there were hitters out there as well. It was more so, these are the guys that really fit in pretty well, especially Lopez. Like, Lopez was the guy I had circled as the one that checked so many boxes. He's the guy that they thought they were getting with David Robertson, right? And even with Jorge Lopez to a lesser extent, they still need help from a righty in the back of the bullpen. And he was a guy available on a really cheap deal as well. So if nothing else, like, that was somebody that I think they were very optimistic was going to make their way to the Marlins, and he didn't. And they're left in a situation where, they don't add any outside talent. Today was the last day to add outside talent that would still be postseason eligible if you made it to the postseason. So they could still make moves outside the organization the rest of this in September, but those guys wouldn't be able to help you much after September anyway. So there's just not a whole lot of upside to going outside the org at this point.
Yeah. Nick, your thoughts on this? Marlins whiffing on the pitchers. We'll get into the hitter side and what happened there with the Reds a little later. But talk to me about these three guys on screen. Would you have had a preference of the three, and maybe seeing them going to another team?
I mean, it's really tough with it because I know we're saying that the Marlins kind of whiffed on the pitchers, but it's really not their fault at a certain point. Like, they couldn't do anything about it with the Guardians being ahead of them in the waiver list. So that's the unfortunate part there. It wasn't really their fault, and it is weird for Cleveland to pick those guys up. So it was almost, like Eli was saying, it seemed perfect for the Marlins to be able to get at least one of these guys. So Lopez, obviously, I said would have been probably the preference, exactly what you want, another bullpen arm to go in there, get innings, and do relatively well. And I mean, shoot, Giolito, when you look at Giolito, his Angels run was terrible, to be honest. He was really bad with the Angels. But Lucas Giolito was a very good pitcher and was great with the White Sox for the past couple of years. So he would have been a great bolster to the Marlins rotation, or I think he'll be great in Cleveland. Or not, yeah. But also with Giolito too, coming to Miami, I think would have been a lot better for him, Miami being a little bit more of a pitcher's park, would have helped him a lot more pitching wise. So I think it's really just not really a whiff by the Marlins, but just a tough blow to not get even one of these guys. So I think all three would have helped them in a big way. Because the Marlins pitching situation it's looking at sometimes a Johnny Cueto or a Brian Hoeing starting games down the line here. And it's Lucas Giolito would be a pretty solid guy going out there every fifth day. So it's my thought.
Yeah. Mike, talk to me. Well, what are your thoughts on this and the Marlins losing out on two relievers and probably a starter that they really could have used?
Yeah, it really sucks that it was three guys that were taken by one team. I'd imagine that MLB can change this next year, whether it's only allowing one guy to get picked up or something different. But you can imagine that's not going to stay there for very long. But the fact of the matter is that they wanted all three of these guys, which is pretty much telling us that Cam knew she whiffed in the trade deadline, not getting probably another right-handed reliever or another backhand starter. And that's really sucks because, I had a feeling that either the Padres or the Indians or the Guardians were going to do something like this. And even though they're probably out of it, they ended up picking up all the guys that we needed. And so it really sucks.
Yeah. And with it there, Eli, before we get into the hitters, I want to talk to you about another pitcher that the Angels had, Dominic Leone, going to Seattle, a contending team. I believe they already clinched a playoff berth. Is that a guy that could have worked for the Marlins? And maybe why do you see that they were specifically enamored with these three rather than maybe some of the other pitchers that were also on the waivers?
I was looking back at it. I'd forgotten that Dominic Leone a couple years ago was lights out. Not this year, but a couple of years ago. If you go back to, 2021, he had a 1.51 ERA for the Giants. That was the year where the Giants, everybody was superhuman for them, including him. But that was 2 years ago. Kind of since then, he's a more middling guy that I don't think would be like a clear big step forward, considering how he's pitched most of this year with the Mets and also the Angels. Among the pitchers available, I think these three were natural ones at top. I mean, Matt Moore was one I wasn't super focused on just because he's a lefty. At the same time, he has reverse splits where he's especially good against right-handed batters anyway. And as it turns out, I would have been fine with them picking up him. The other pitchers that were out there were just on bad contracts or bad performance or both. Mike Clevenger, he's been pitching well, but his contract has this big buyout in the offseason that just made it unrealistic. You're not going to pay $5.5 million for 1 month of Mike Clevenger, and that's what it would have been because of the $4 million due to him right after the season ends as a buyout. And then with Carlos Carrasco, he was somebody that he used to be really solid, but this year's just been a disaster for the Mets and didn't make much sense there. I mean, the other options were on the hitting side, but with them, it was all outfielders. It was Harrison Bader, it was Hunter Renfroe, and it was also Randall Grichuk. So all three of them outfielders, and Renfroe and Grichuk both being corner outfielders. This Marlins team, they don't have a big void there. At the same time, their offense has been terrible for an extended period of time, even after the deadline. And you could say, especially the last week and a half, they've been as bad as any contending team hitting wise during that period. So even if these guys weren't a clear fit, I didn't think the team could afford to come away empty at this deadline. So weird stuff happened on the pitching side, but I really felt they should have put in a claim for one of the outfielders out there to ensure that they would get somebody. Because all three of these outfielders, these two and Grichuk, who went unclaimed, all three of them made it through the Marlins. And as it turns out, these two go to a team they're directly competing against for a playoff spot. So that's what really stings, makes it doubly painful for them. And it could cost them. They've been slumping recently heading into getting placed on waivers, but these guys have pretty long track records of being solid, productive players.
Yeah, it definitely sucks there. You look at Harrison Bader and the way he's been performing, really mainly just exceptional defense. And Hunter Renfroe will give you the home runs. I think now on the Reds, he's already leading the team in home runs compared to everyone else. And really, the Marlins really could have used that. I know there are guys like Garrett Hampson and hasn't been performing well. Jesus Sanchez has gone on a really bad cold streak. And these guys, you could have just bring them in and see what happens. Maybe they go on a hot streak. Maybe they change the clubhouse, change the chemistry. But I really feel like the Marlins could have used at least one of these guys. And also Randall Grichuk not getting claimed at all was a bit surprising, as we're joined by Isaac. But before we get to Isaac, I want to hear Nick's thoughts on Bader and Renfroe going to the Reds. Both of them going to a wild card contender right above the Marlins and went right past the Fish.
Yeah, I think the real killer is, like what you just said, that they're going to the Reds. I don't see it as a huge problem that the Marlins didn't get them, just because I like Bader and I like Renfroe. I like Renfroe's ability to hit the home run, bring power to a lineup, which with the Marlins, honestly, power doesn't hurt. Josh Bell added power, Berger added some power, but throwing a Hunter Renfroe in there would really give the extra pop to the lineup. And Bader's, no question, one of the better defenders in baseball in center field, but obviously I'd imagine he'd play right or left with Jazz. Probably didn't want to throw Jazz in another new outfield position. But I think the Marlins did whiff on not getting one of these guys. I think they would actually bolster the lineup a pretty decent amount. But I do like them sticking with DLC and Sanchez just because that's more of the future of this team. When you look into next year, you're assuming those two are going to be the guys going into next year. And I don't see them obviously re-signing Renfroe or Bader if they got them. So I kind of like the idea of just sticking with those two guys, let them ride it out. And you never know, DLC has those times where he just goes off for 2 weeks straight and starts hitting good. So I like them just sticking with those guys, but I also think a new bat really could have maybe bolstered them and maybe give them that extra little push to possibly make the playoffs. But I think it's a little unfortunate not getting one of these guys, and I wish they really would have bought in, done something a little bit more, because it seems like this could have been a year going into now. Now they've been slumping, and this maybe really could have got them going right back again.
Yeah. Mike, well, with these two guys, Bader, Renfroe coming to the Marlins, where do you see the Fish now? Like, how do they go about the rest of the season knowing that they could have used that help to get them maybe a couple more runs, a couple more hits, to now where it's the point where they're just staying put with what they have, and it hasn't been working as of late. So they're just trying now to see if they could put anything together.
Yeah, in the last stream, I said that the guy I would want would be Hunter Renfroe to, be a replacement of Garrett Hampson, to be the fourth outfielder and play two with Easy and De La Cruz. But it sucks that they're in Cincinnati. But to me, I'm not really that scared that they went to Cincinnati, even though they're top of us, just because they need pitching too. And they already had a really good offense. I feel like I know their defense in the outfield was pretty bad, probably even just as bad as the Marlins. But I feel like they were hitting it good anyway. So I feel like it was more of a lateral move to me for the Reds. But our only way to improve this offense now is tomorrow and see who we call up. But for me, I feel like they're going to end up calling up Edward and Pittsburgh anyways. So we'll see. It's going to happen internally.
Yeah, we'll get to September call-ups, as it is just one day away to see how the Marlins do that, how it's going to fare in the National Series. Eli, as we're finishing off these waiver claims, were you surprised? I'm looking just with Randall Grichuk not getting claimed. Is that a guy that the Fish could have used? Him not getting claimed by any team was a bit of a surprise when looking at that just a few hours ago.
Yeah, I was a little surprised because he's actually earning a lot of money. Overall, it's just that my understanding is that the Rockies are paying a lot of that money that is still owed to him. So he's not. He's been a more inconsistent player than guys like Renfro through the years, and even Bader as well. So I'm not shocked that he went unclaimed. Um, but I had some confidence in him, and I felt like, especially given like the very recent occurrence with Jorge Soler and his hip issue, like I felt that made it especially like that made it easier to fit in a corner outfielder into this situation and still get him some at bats. If I think they should just treat Soler as a DH the rest of the year to make sure something like this, to do whatever they can to make sure this doesn't happen again with him dealing with a minor issue. And that, yeah, I thought Grichuk would fit in pretty well. He was playing great for the Rockies, and it wasn't just a Coors Field thing. Like he was playing well in road games the entire first half of the season as well. A little surprised that he didn't get claimed. To me, like we'll find out. I think they're gonna regret not bringing somebody. I think he would have been. To me, it was all just a comparison between these hitters available and Yuli Gurriel. Yuli, to me, is a guy that I feel at this juncture, it's over. Like, this is a guy that I was slandering a bit entering the year. I did not think I thought he was the same player that he was with the Astros last year. And it took 5 months, but after 5 months, you could check the stats. He's now kind of exactly in line with who he was last year when he just was not a big league caliber player anymore. Given what this team has done, we know that Arise can play first base in emergencies, but even more so now with Jake Berger in the mix. Jake Berger could be your backup first baseman at times as well. Like there's no need for Gurriel anymore when he's not hitting. And even though he's still smooth defensively, like if you look at realistic ways that they can improve, there's no catchers available. There's no shortstops available on waivers. Like they could not make that really big leap forward that they wanted to with those type of names out there. What they could do, what they still can do, is like maximize those first base DH opportunities as best they can. Whether it was claiming somebody from outside or hopefully now promoting from within. That's, I guess, the next best thing is now promoting one of these red hot guys from AAA. They can do better. They need to try to do better. They need every single plate appearance. They need to try to get something new out of it just because they are so bad over this recent stretch. Just one of the worst offenses in all of baseball over these last couple of weeks. You need to try to change something. And so now they just have very limited flexibility in terms of what they can change between now and the end of the year.
Yeah. Now to go from that to talk about another disappointing stretch for the Marlins. That was this Rays series that happened just yesterday, getting swept by Tampa Bay. Not a fun series at all. One game was a blowout. Another game was a shutout. Just not great overall for the Fish. Just really bad performances, swinging the ball. In that first game, there was a home run by Jazz, but it seemed like just right after that, the Marlins could not get anything going. Between the 6th and 9th inning of that game, the Rays scored, I believe, 10 runs in that, 10, 11 runs just between those 3 innings and just couldn't get anything going. Nick, talk to us about the Rays and how the Rays just own the Marlins, it seems like, over the past 10 years or so.
I mean, the Rays are just a good baseball team. There's no question about it. They seem to just throw anybody out there, and they're going to be phenomenal, especially against the Marlins. It just seems like anyone's going to go out there and play really good. But it was just sad almost watching these games, just kind of looking at them, watching them. It was just kind of there's no offense, no production on the offense, like no good at bats where the Rays are able to get these guys when they get a base runner on, move them over, get them home, do whatever they can to get a base runner home. With the Marlins, look at the first game. Marlins had 10 hits. You have 10 hits. One of them was a home run. You should score more than 2 runs in a game. If you have 10 hits, presumably, that's what you're thinking. You should be able to score more than 2 runs. So it's just bad offensive production. You can't go. Luzardo had a beautiful start in game 2, and you give him literally nothing on offense. Give him no help. You can see it right there. Only had 1 hit, 6 innings. That's a great start from Luzardo. I know he had a decent amount of pitches throughout that game, but you're just going to give him no offensive production, and it's not like they were facing the best pitchers in the MLB either. I mean, Eflin going yesterday, he's a solid pitcher, but he's nothing absolutely spectacular. He should be able to rack up some hits, get probably a run or 2 across at least. So it's it was really sad watching these two games, and it's not a fun experience watching them play the Rays, and it's kind of getting disheartening watching some of these games now where it's you think, okay, maybe they're going to turn it on now and get rolling towards the postseason, but it's just not happening right now for the Marlins, honestly.
Yeah, and I can't blame people for being really frustrated because this is outscored 14-2. It's kind of as simple as that. Like, even though it was closer than that would suggest, right? 14-2, but obviously game 2 was tied going into extra innings. It was tied for as long as it could possibly be tied. And then game 1 was the Marlins were winning 2-1 in the 6th inning when Sandy came out there. Before that game got away from him, and then the bullpen imploded from there and made it a lot worse. And hence that just made it all the more clear as to why they could use relief help. That one game really hammered it home, where these low leverage guys just don't even give you a chance to stay in the game. So it wasn't quite as bad as the overall scores would say. It was still pretty bad. It was especially bad offensively, both games in these. It's a lot of different guys. I single out Yuli just because I look for ways that they can change something, and he's the guy that is expendable at this point. But it's not just him. It's so many of these players on this team. Jazz has that one good game. Well, Jazz provided the only 2 runs in the series in the Marlins, but overall he's had a pretty extended stretch of mediocrity. Arise being probably the biggest culprit here, just considering how high the expectations were. He continues every single night from him is either 1 for 4 or 1 for 5 with a single. And that's just not a lot. That's the thin line between him being a superstar when he goes 2 for 4 and 2 for 5 versus when he goes 1 for 4 and 1 for 5. That's the difference between him being kind of an empty calories player versus being one of the most important players on this entire team. This has been such a long stretch of him. It's pretty easy to observe it, how often he's getting underneath the ball and just not driving it far enough to do damage with those swings, but also at the same time, how he's not even taking any walks whatsoever. He's just really undisciplined and swinging at pitches. He's not giving himself a great chance to get the pitch that he wants, that he should be swinging at and can do the most damage against as well. So you can point so many different directions between him and De La Cruz and the ongoing issues they have at shortstop and catcher, whoever is playing of that pair. Even Josh Bell recently has finally cooled off a little bit. So there's just so many holes in here. And I think you can point to everybody, even including Jake Berger, who's been getting his hits, but has only hit 2 home runs in an entire month. When they acquired him, the particular need that they thought they were addressing is power, home run power, where if nothing else, he could single-handedly put runs on the board. Even though his overall numbers as a Marlin have been great, it's been a different profile than they were expecting, and you could say it's been a less valuable profile than they were expecting offensively because it's a lot of singles and not a ton of extra base hits. So it leads to some of these situations where they get on base runners, but those base runners don't go anywhere.
And that is the biggest thing. Like you just said it, though. It is really just these base runners. The Marlins have had the ability to kind of get on base, but it's just no one goes anywhere. You get these guys on base, but you need to somehow get a run home. Like I thought, not that I really believe strongly that this team's going to bunt guys over, but if someone gets on first, bunt them over again, do something someone's got to get around the base to score. That's just the biggest problem. You can't win a baseball game when you're not scoring. If guys are just sitting on first base the whole time, it's probably going to be a double play, to be honest, half the time. But it's just no production getting a run home.
And we don't score at all anymore either compared to last year.
Audio is a little bit better, Mike. Give us another sentence to see if we got it clearly enough.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we still got a little bit of an echo there.
Okay, I'll try to fix it again.
Maybe go out without the AirPods. Maybe it'll be
totally podless.
Let's see, but while Mike figures that out, that's really bad performance offensively from this series. Let's go to game 2. Game 2 to the bottom, the ending of that inning. David Robertson comes out. Marlins fans, we've seen David Robertson start as the closer, has been rocked since coming to Miami. Then in that game 2, just did what he's been doing since he's come to the Marlins, blowing saves, blowing opportunities, giving up runs and hits. Mike, what is wrong with David Robertson? This is not what the Marlins have hoped for when trading 2 top 30 prospects for him.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. To me, I think it's a mental thing. I don't know if you guys saw, his interviews, his exit interviews, him leaving the Mets, and his interview on Foul Pole, but I just don't think he kind of is happy here, and I think it's messing with him, because the 3 hits he gave up were not really rocketed in that second game. It was 3 ground balls. Well, yeah, 3 ground balls that just got through. So he's just a little bit unlucky. Sometimes he hangs a few curveballs, but I just think more overall it's just his confidence, and he probably doesn't want to be here. I think he really liked being in New York.
Yeah, I think he just doesn't want to be a Marlin, like you mentioned. Like, it kind of feels like he just sees it as, I don't know, lower or compared to the Mets or the way the franchise is run. You look at last year with the Phillies going all the way to the World Series, coming to the Mets with high expectations. You're there. You're with filled crowds. The stadiums are packed. There's 100 reporters coming to you every day. And now with the Marlins, it seems like you'll barely get 10,000. Minimal amount of attention, minimal amount of reporters. He just seems like he's that type of guy who's just been around so much. And here he's able to relax just a bit because he might not be crucified in terms of the reporters and the fan base compared to when he was with the Mets, the Yankees, the Phillies. I was wondering, do you kind of get that sense, Eli, if at all, it's just maybe the market or just the way that mental thing playing for a team that's maybe lower in market size or fan base compared to the other teams he's played for in his career?
You can't pin it on the crowd size.
Not
His
crowd,
debut came on
yeah.
during the Phillies series, which I remember being fairly well attended, and then soon after that was the Yankees series, which was like the best attended series at Lone Depot
He
Park.
played for Tampa as well, and he likes Tampa. I heard
Right.
that in an interview too. He has a home in Tampa because, of course, probably the Yankees being in Tampa as well, and also the Phillies being in Clearwater. So he's been in small crowds with the Rays. So I don't think that's really a problem.
Right.
I just think it's the fit. It just wasn't a part of his plan in 2023.
Yeah, that's some of it. And Mike mentioned it during his last outing. It was just ground balls. If you're going to allow any type of contact, like that's usually not the worst kind. Usually when you have that type of outing, it doesn't lead to 3 runs scoring in that type of ending the way that it did last night and kind of put the game away. So it's been a mix where I don't think he's quite as bad as his ERA would suggest since he's been here. But yeah, it's still been pretty bad. The strikeouts have gone way down. That's been a big part of it. This is somebody very, very consistently throughout his career. He's missed a lot of bats. And since he's come over, this is one of the really ill-timed slump where he's just not missing quite as many bats with his cutter or with his breaking balls, just with anything. He's just not. So I don't know how you explain that. He's very old. He is 38. There is a certain point where, physically, maybe it's not that he's cooked as a pitcher. It's just that it could be that at the end, we're nearing the end of a season where he's been pitching every couple of days the entire year long. He's been available, that maybe he's just at a stage of his career where the workload catches up to you late in the year. It could be as simple as that, where it's just a little bit fatigue related, kind of regardless of being traded one way or the other with him. Yeah, I've been disappointed, though, just with the way that he's reacted to this publicly, because I had a pretty positive idea of him as a clubhouse guy and as just a person based on what I had seen for the previous decade and a half of his career. And I don't think he's really handling this slump pretty well. It is one of the worst slumps of his career. And, I think I'd like to see him be just a little bit more like kind of reacting the way instead of downplaying it. And it seems like he's just done a lot to kind of downplay how bad it's been. But yeah, I mean, ultimately that's the most important thing, is just how you're going to accepting what you're getting from him and how you're going to use him moving forward. They've already made the decision that he's not going to be the closer moving forward, and they're pitching in relatively lower leverage situations. The only reason why he was in the game last night is because the Marlins did not score in the first 9 innings. Otherwise, the game would be over. They would have won the game before that. So that was part of it too. But yeah, this just has not worked out. And this is a trade that I think was relatively popular. He seems like a really safe addition, and just really unfortunate for everybody involved how it's played out.
Really quickly before we head to the break, do the Marlins do an Angels with David Robertson, or would you guys prefer that? Would you guys see that as a positive if they would do that with David Robertson, like the Angels did with all those players?
Well, they can't do it exactly the same. You're just saying, should they cut their losses? And I think maybe they would have if both Matt Moore and Lopez had made it to them. I'll be curious to see. It could have been a situation. They put in claims on all three of those guys, just so we've had some questions about how exactly that process works. But they were prepared if it had played that way, that they could have had all three of those guys come in at the exact same time. There would have to be corresponding moves to fit them in. I don't think it would have been crazy for them to squeeze out Robertson if they were adding 3 new pitchers at the same time to their roster like that. But yeah, because they didn't get any of them, that's I think you're in a situation where you just don't have a lot of options internally that are dramatically better than him. So I think he sticks around a little bit longer. You just hope that but the struggles are continuing. He really should be near the bottom of the pecking order. Unfortunately, both him and Jorge Lopez, the two outside additions they made to their bullpen, those guys should be at the very bottom of the totem pole right now, where they're not really impacting wins or losses either way. But I think it's still a little bit premature to get rid of him, just considering how recently he was actually a good reliever.
Yeah, and we could go a little bit on Jorge Lopez. I wanted to mention on him. I was at the game, the 11-2 game, that first one, and just watching Jorge Lopez, he did not just seem into it. He pitched the last 2 innings, 4 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. But at the end of it, looking at him, he did not just look like he had it at all. It just looked like really bad from the start. I believe he had 42 pitches, 22 of them were balls, and 20 strikes, and that was not great from Jorge. Just a lack of command he has with his different pitches. It's just not something that hopefully the Marlins can fix, but of right now, it has not been great for that trade with Jorge Lopez. Looking at that, and that's how far he's maybe fallen to now. He's doing mop-up innings and 10-run games for the Marlins and barely getting through multiple innings and having more balls than strikes, which is something you never want from your reliever, to give up that many. But Eli, I think it's time for a flipped fish.
Yeah, we're a slightly different one because just did one last week that between these same 2 teams. So we wanted to specify this time that the player connected between these two be somebody from way back, from before they moved to DC, from the Expos era. These franchises being one and the same, kind of linked in that way that those players are still eligible. So just Marlins, Expos, former player that was played for both teams during their career, going with a retired player. And this one's pretty hard because it's going to be any hard option considering the Expos have been going for almost 2 decades now. We're rolling way back to the 1990s. Nope, not you. There we go. Former Marlins and Expos player, a switch hitting infielder who debuted in 91, finished up in 96. There are his overall numbers, a good on-base guy. And he played for, based on the years, the very early era Marlins and also the Montreal Expos at one point during those 6 seasons in the big leagues. We'll go to break. And on the other side, try to guess in the live chat who this could be. On the other side of the break, we'll be back with the reveal on the rest of the show. Stay with us.
And we're back for our Flip Fish segment. I just want to start off LMF. No, it is not Tim Raines. Tim Raines did not play for 5 years there. As we have Isaac, you're muted, but tell us who is this switch hitter?
Come on, Chase. I thought he'd be better than that. I'll give them maybe a few more seconds to see if they can get it, but doesn't.
So tell us before we do it. Tell us why you chose this specific player, Isaac. Why?
There weren't many options to go from. The Marlins just played the Nationals a week ago. And so we went through a whole bunch of fun names for that one. I believe we went with Jonathan Solano. So, with it being the Nationals again, we decided to do a Marlins and Expos name. And there was a few names. Andre Dawson, we could have gone with Tim Raines, like Chase said. But Brett Barbary is the name that we went with. He played for both franchises, obviously, at the time of the Expos and with the Florida Marlins. And I thought that was someone that, maybe Marlins After Dark, Sean Millerick, or even Loud Marlins fan could get. But unfortunately, no one did. But I feel very proud of myself whenever nobody can get it. So that's a success for Fish on First tonight.
All right. Very nice there. Again, not Tim Raines, Brett Barbary, the choice for flipped fish, as now we are getting into this series between the Nationals and the Marlins. And for those of you who do like signings, if anything, Brewers just signed Josh Donaldson, if anyone has any interest on that. So Brian Anderson
on a minor league deal.
On a minor league deal for Josh Donaldson going to AAA Nashville.
But what does that mean for Brian Anderson, his playing time? Because it's kind of splitting between third base and right field, but lately he's just been splitting time between left bench and right bench for the Brewers. He is so interesting. Bites into his playing time even further with Donaldson.
See what happens there, but let's see what happens with this series. The Marlins are coming off again a series sweep versus the Rays, or getting swept, I should say. And then they did play the Nationals before that and were lost 2-1 in that series, and not look good at all in that series against the Nationals. The Nationals, they had their lunch against the Marlins that series. In this preview, hopefully might fare better for the Marlins, but it seems like we're getting the same pitchers for the Nationals that we are from that series to this one. Jonah Doan, I believe we're getting Trevor Williams, and I forget who that middle one is, but they're going to see the same pitchers in this. And Mike Anthony going up against the Nationals, always heated when you're playing a division rival. The Marlins have had Nationals number in Washington, but as of late, the Nationals have seemingly been pretty hot. And I would have told anyone August 31st they would have had the same record as the Padres. It would have been a little crazy, but how are the Nationals? How do you think they're going to do against the Marlins? And just your little preview for the series.
I think it's going to be a tough series, knowing that the Marlins have a lot to lose here, and the Nationals are they said it the other day that they're trying to play spoiler right now. But I feel like it's going to be good that we're facing the same pitchers, because I think we need to see them again. I think we've done good against guys this year that have like a huge track record. I know we had that stint where we played the Yankees and the Astros and we hit a lot better, because I feel like those guys have bigger track records than Adone and Irvin and guys like that. So I feel like we'll play a little bit better, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're definitely players there. And they, the other players have been seemingly really underrated. You look at a guy like Lane Thomas, who has a close to a 900 OPS, who's been really great for them. Josiah Gray, the All-Star, Mackenzie Gore, those pitchers. Alex Call has been really good. They had Jaime Candelario at the beginning, but traded him. Keibert Ruiz and former Marlin cannot be in flipped fish Stone Garrett, since he did not play for the Marlins. Nick, talk to us about this. Any players, and maybe how can the Marlins just do better against the Nationals? When we say the Nationals, everyone goes, oh, it's a sweep 2-1. But as of late, it seems like the Nationals have had the Marlins number.
I know. It's just crazy to think about the beginning of the year when you were thinking, oh, the Marlins are probably maybe going to have a good year, maybe be right above the Nationals. But halfway through the year was, okay, we're way better than the Nationals. These couple series, you look down the line and said, oh, Nationals, that's 4 games, probably winning, help us get into the wild card. But now it's like, it's crazy. It's now the Nationals. Shoot, I'm almost thinking that the Nationals are probably going to win this series based off how the Marlins played the last time versus the Nationals. They already won that series. And the Marlins, was the same story for most of those games, just no hitting. The one game they had 2 home runs that went up for them, and then Soler hit the 1 home run that just went up for him. That was the offense, basically. It was kind of the same story of they can get some base runners on, but no one's going to move any guys over and no one's going to score. That was just the biggest problem in that game. And going tonight, Adon was really good the last game against the Marlins. The only reason the Marlins came even into that game a little bit was because they beat up on one of the bullpen guys for the Nationals. They scored 4 runs on him. So they were basically out of that game with Adon pitching. So we'll see how tonight goes with him, if they can somewhat figure this dude out, or is he going to go another 6 innings of no-run baseball and go 12 straight against the Marlins with no runs? We'll see how that goes. I mean, Brax hopefully can get a good performance out here. He pitched against the same team the last time, gave up 3 runs, so it should be the same matchup as just about a week ago or just about that time ago. So we'll have to see how it goes. It should be relatively the same. If the Marlins can produce some runs and move guys over and score, they'll have a pretty decent shot at this game. And I think they can sweep the series if they really put the offense on and they really get it going. But something's going to have to turn on. Someone's going to have to step up, and they're really going to have to collectively get some runs in.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my mind around those same 3 guys, Adon, Jake Irvin,
And Trevor.
That weird guy, and Trevor Williams. I can't imagine all 3 of them having quality starts again against the same team a week later. That usually does not go quite that way. These hitters and their preparation should be too good for that to happen. That's kind of the only thing you can point to as being optimistic, because they're against several different teams. They faced a lot of underwhelming starters during this 2-week period, and they've struggled against almost every single one of them. So it's really grasping for reasons to feel optimistic, but on paper, it's a more talented team. Fingers crossed that Jorge Soler is going to be an X factor in this series. He's not in the starting lineup tonight. Mm-hmm. Skip says he's available as a pinch hitter. You would hope that he's available the final 3 games of this series. It's tricky, though, with a hip issue. That's not that far away from a back issue, and those can be very dicey. That's a huge key to this. That's yet another reason why I felt it was important for them to claim one of these outfielders out there, just with this question about one of their most important players, as to whether he's going to be available. And a really big question as to whether he'll even play the outfield the rest of the season. They need help, and one of the guys that realistically could carry them moving forward, he's not 100% right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and looking at it, I think a player we have to highlight that from the Nationals that just has been skyrocketing as of late, just CJ Abrams, the way he's been performing. Close to 40 stolen bases, close to 20 home runs. Just reading a stat here is 6 home runs and 20 stolen bases away from a 2020-40 season, 20 home runs, 20 doubles, and 40 stolen bases. And really a player that has been great for them since I believe he was in the Juan Soto trade, right? Yeah, so something for the future, and I believe CJ Abrams could give the Marlins some trouble. Isaac, how do you see this series? We usually say, easy against the Nationals, but the Marlins have been slumping hard when it comes to playing these series.
Yeah, well, the Nationals are coming off a losing series in Toronto, so you might hope that they're sort of, their fire's flamed out a little bit, but it's still going to be a tough 4-gamer. I think the best thing for Miami is that they're out of Lone Depot Park. I never thought I'd say that, but I think they need to get out of that ballpark right away. Nationals Park, they've had some history of hitting really well in Washington, so I think that's going to be a factor for them. I think Wendell has a home run there as a Marlin, so maybe it'll incentivize these guys to hit it out a little bit more. And it's same exact matchups for national side anyway. It's going to be those 3 starters that you guys mentioned. So you'd have to think that facing these guys twice in the same week can only benefit the offense for Miami.
Yeah, and just looking at the lineups here, again, no Jorge Soler as he gets scratched due to injury. So we're going to have Jake Berger at DH, and third base is everyone's favorite, Garrett Hampson. God, looking at from Brian De La Cruz to Nick Fortes, it does not look great for the Marlins. Jesus has been slumping, and when you have Garrett Hampson join Wendell, Nick Fortes, all guys who have not been playing well as of late, it might be a little difficult for the Fish. Mike Anthony, looking at this lineup, just how is it fair without Jorge Soler? Again, when you have someone who can hit those home runs and get some RBIs, some runs in, how is it now? Do you see this team without Soler? Like who do you believe could step up?
I like the guy who's batting second, the former National. I feel he's going to be my choice for MVP later on today. I just think coming back to the Nationals ballpark where he's done well will be good for him. And I kind of like him in the 2 spot, being a switch hitter as well. But other than that, after, struggling with Jazz and Brian also struggling, and then Garrett and Wendell and Fortes, you kind of have to hope that 1 through 3 carries us this 4-game stretch.
Yeah, And we could also go with the first guy, Luis Ariz. Eli, we're at a point where who knows what have said this, but Luis Ariz might not even win the batting title. Where it seems like we were at the All-Star break, it seems like he was going to run away with it and just maybe even reach 400 or potentially just 380, winning the batting title. So now where he's hitting under 350, which is still crazy to say, and saying a player slumping and not playing well, hitting under 350. But with Ariz, he has just not been performing as well. And do you believe that him being hitting in the 2-hole, being the leadoff guy, just what can Ariz do to recapture his pre-All-Star break self?
It's got to be a little more disciplined, which is hard to ask from him because when he sometimes has had these hot streaks where he swings at everything and has success. And I think that did just more harm than good. That made him feel a little too invincible early in the year when he was finding hits in all these different ways. And maybe kind of set unrealistic expectations within himself as to what he could actually do with different pitches rather than just continuing to be selective and just finding the pitches that he wants to hit most of all. So I think a lot of that is leading a little bit more into that and just recognizing the importance of count leverage and getting yourself into good counts more so than anything else. I don't think his mindset has really changed. I don't think he's consciously thinking about driving the ball out of the ballpark. I think he's searching for that nirvana, that perfect launch angle where it goes over the shortstop's head and falls in front of the left fielder. I think he's still searching to do that, where getting those low line drives, and he's just not exactly, is a little bit off mechanically in trying to do that. The longer it goes on, man, you lose a little bit of confidence that he's going to suddenly self-correct, but yet that is still kind of my prevailing thought here. Is I think there's still there's somebody that knows his body so well and knows exactly what he's trying to do that I think he's going to just figure it out. And by putting him in the leadoff spot, you give him as many plate appearances as possible in order to straighten himself out. And there's not a lot you can do right here with him other than just continuing to throw him out there and kind of just giving him that message where where he's not just reinforcing. You want him to be confident, but you also just want to make him understand that he's not a perfect, that not every pitch is created equal, that there are still should be something he's looking for in each matchup to try to take advantage of. And this is a pretty favorable matchup. Now, as we keep reiterating, going up against the same pitchers he just went up against last weekend. So maybe that does the trick where he knows these guys, he knows how their pitches moves, and he knows where those pitches are going to wind up from having seen those pitches just a week ago. I think that helps, just facing familiar names. So I would not be surprised whatsoever if he has a good series simply because he's facing the same guys that he just faced in the previous matchup between these teams.
And to add on that, the league has really adjusted to where he's been spraying the ball. The left fielders have been coming more in every series, and he's just like hitting it right to him lately, and that's been really bad. Like his bread and butter has always been filleting the balls right over shortstop, and the left fielder has been playing almost right behind the shortstop lately. And another thing in his approach, early in the year, he would automatically take that first pitch. And lately he's been swinging a lot of those first pitch where early in the year he was always taking it, even if it was down the middle or even if it was in the dirt. And so that's something I wish he can go back to, and hopefully he does here in September.
Yeah. And then on the rest of that lineup, Nick, looking at the back end of that, going with Garrett Hampson, Joey Wendell, Nick Fortes, how do you just see that bottom half of the lineup? Do you believe that they can produce that out, or is it just you see them as almost automatic outs when getting to the plate?
I mean, I don't see them as just straight automatic outs, but it's really hard to ask for some level of production there. There's really not a lot going on at that bottom of the lineup. Like Joey Wendell has been a good hitter for a lot of his career, but he's getting one of those guys that's getting older, and he's had a tough year with the Marlins, and it just hasn't looked great. We know what Garrett Hampson has done this year. He's had a couple good streaks, a couple good games, but he hasn't done much of anything really. And the whole catcher position, I know Fortes is in there today, but the catcher position has just been terrible. Honestly, to be brutally honest, just at the plate, they've just not been very good hitting. So the Marlins lineup comes down to those top 6 guys of really them needing to produce. And if one of those bottom 3 guys happens to get on, it really is up to Arise to then move him over and Josh Bell to drive them in. Where it's because you're not expecting really those guys to get on base that much. You hope they can, but there's just not a ton of hope in these guys to really have strong, good at-bats that they're going to really work a pitch or work a count and everything and then work it into the top of the order. There's just right now, it's just not a lot of hope.
Yeah. Before we get into the Nationals and looking at their lineup, this is for all 3 of you. How important is this series for the Marlins? Maybe 1 through 10. 10 being they desperately need to win this series if they won't have any hope. 1 is they can lose the series and still be relatively okay. Just how important is this series for the Fish?
And it's a 10.
10.
There's Eli, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
But-
Go ahead. You first, Nick.
But yeah, I mean, it's a 10. There's really no question about it. They're 3 games out of the wild card, and there's 3 teams ahead of them, so that makes it that
And
much
then
harder.
if you've seen the schedule, you know why too. For the next probably 9 games are not any easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's the thing of you have to win these games against teams you should be winning against. To make the playoffs, you're going to have to win these games. And if you get a 3-game series against the Nationals, you say thank you to the schedule at the start of the year to say, hey, there's 3 games down the stretch that it's, hey, we can win these games going into September now where that's exactly what you want. So it's really must win to me.
Yeah. You were going to say, Eli?
Every series is a 10 the rest of the year now. They are in this position where I'll if I could stall for just a few seconds, I could get the graph of their playoff odds and how they've progressed throughout this entire year. We'll just grab it right here.
Really quickly, some of their series. They have the Dodgers after this, the Phillies, the Brewers, and then the Braves. So that's a difficult stretch of games right there if they even want to sniff the playoffs as we're looking at what their playoff odds are. Oof.
Yeah, it's as low as it's ever been at this point. 10%. That's what it takes. Because we've been talking about what win total they have to get to make the postseason. We think it's only maybe 6 games over 500. If you get to 84, and certainly if you get to 85, that's probably going to be enough. But the deeper you go into the year, when you're under 500, they have to be one of the best teams in baseball the rest of this year to win that spot. Are they capable of doing that with perfect health and with everybody playing up to their potential the rest of the way? I think it's still a possibility, but it's about the 10% possibility that enough things go their way in that regard. Yeah, every single game at this point is pretty precious. So, and we should note again, September roster expansion coming tomorrow. After looking at it, there's a limit on pitchers. You can't be both pitchers. You have to add at least one more position player in here. And hopefully that position player is somebody that takes the at-bats of guys on this team that shouldn't be batting. So we'll see exactly who they call up. People know the names of the guys that are raking at AAA between Xavier Edwards and Troy Johnston, and even Dane Myers has been pretty good since getting sent down. They need to bring up somebody, and they need to use that somebody when they get brought up to, if nothing else, in some late game situations, give them a shot in those opportunities to make something happen, either as hitters or as base runners, one way or another. Yeah, every game is absolutely precious at this point. It's been a full quarter of the season now since the All-Star break, believe it or not, and they have lost 2/3 of their games. And they're now at a point where you just can't. There's only so many changes you can make at this point. They need every single game is precious. 10 out of 10 importance.
Yeah. Before we get to predictions, I think we can use this as a little precursor to the predictions. I want to go around the room and ask, who do you guys think will be the 2 September call-ups? I'll go first just to test the waters. I think the pitcher they're going to do, they're not going to get some fancy. I think they're just going to bring in Tommy Nance. And then for the hitting side, it's going to be Xavier Edwards. I think they need that type of infield depth at that position or at that lineup, but I think he can even go ahead and start maybe even the rest of the way over Joey Wendell and guys like that. Eli, your 2 predictions for this?
I would go with Edwards as well. He's conspicuously absent from the Jacksonville lineup tonight. This is the second time in the last week that he's had a day off. I think that's a possible indication that he's already on a flight to DC, potentially. So I'd go with Edwards pretty safely. They have to bring Cueto back. They are going to bring Cueto back from the IL on this weekend when he's eligible. So I'm curious as to whether they actually – I assume they're going to use that final spot on somebody in the moment just to plug a hole. So as I look at pitching options on the 40-man roster, it could be Nance, could be Ryan Weathers, depending how rested he is. It's not going to be Edward because Edward is supposed to pitch tonight for Jacksonville. So I will guess my pitcher. I'll go with Tommy Nance as well.
All right, Nick.
Oh, I'm going to be boring with the pitcher. I was going to say Tommy Nance too. I'll go with him, but we'll go different on the hitter. Not that because I really think it's going to happen, but I like Dan Myers because he's cool. Dane Myers, I like him and he's fun. So I hope they bring up Dane Myers because he'll probably go, a couple months left in the season, probably at 10 bombs. That's my prediction on it. Kidding.
All right. Mike Anthony, your prediction for who they bring up in September?
Yeah, I was always leaning X, and then I was going to say Edward, but I didn't know he was throwing today, so I guess the easy answer is Tommy Nance. But I do wonder if them playing Hampson tonight, if they're seeing what's left of him, and maybe they go with Dane Myers as well after, or someone else.
All right, so yeah, plenty of options the Marlins can go for. Don't forget they can also do Troy Johnson. If that happens, Kevin and Carver will have pots and pans down 8th Street. If he comes up to the major league roster, again, it could be Ryan Weathers. So we'll have to see starting tomorrow, starting very soon. But going for those predictions, Eli, let's cue the video.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
All right, this is prediction time, and do not forget for this series, it is 4 games. It is a 4-game set versus the Washington Nationals. Your MVP can be from either team, hitter, batter, and your prediction for the series does not have to go with the batter, so you can see Marlins sweep Josiah Gray as your MVP as we're looking at the super subscribers. Does that say Hunter Renfroe? What?
I think he changed. Who was it that gave me that one?
Devin, what are we doing?
I think Devin changed it. I have to double check. I believe he changed it to Jake Berger. If it's not in this chat, I think he mentioned it on Twitter. So I will correct that before posting the final version on Twitter. But he was going out on a limb and thinking they were going to claim Renfroe, which
I like. He jinxed us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was in the morning. This was pretty early on.
Carter Keyboom. Wow. Okay. I like that. Vargas.
Overall, more optimism for the Marlins than the Nats, despite the Marlins losing to the Nats last weekend. But a good share of splits, as we see as well, with whenever it's an even number of games.
All right. So
and we do have a prediction time video from Noah. Please indulge him on this. The audio quality was not great, but he's at a special airport. He was at an airport in New York, a hotel at JFK in New York, that airport, and he wanted to record his prediction for us there.
Hey guys, checking in from on top of the TWA Hotel here in JFK Airport. I spent the night watching planes pretty much. I think the Marlins are going to make a last-ditch effort, take the series 3-1. It's the last chance or else the season's over. I think Josh Bell's going to be the MVP versus former team, and let's just hope that they don't keel over and end the season now.
All right, I like that.
Wonderful.
Could potentially be the MVP, but let's go with our MVPs, our predictions. Let's get that music, Eli, and let's start with one of our interns, and let's go with Mr. Nick.
Oh, beautiful. Nice and first. And I am not too confident, to be honest. I'm going to go with a series split, and I'm going the boy DLC. I think he turns it on.
All right. Mike Anthony.
Going 3-1 Marlins and Josh Bell MVP.
All All right, just like Noah, Eli.
I'll also go 3-1 Marlins. I've been in a slump lately, rooting for them. Not rooting for them, but kind of counting on them to turn around. But I think they do win this series. And my MVP, Jake Berger, finally hitting a home run. He's been in a big drought. He's overdue for maybe a couple bombs this weekend.
All right, and myself, when I do these predictions, I've heard called Mr. Negativity. The Marlins have to prove me wrong if they want me to pick them, and I've been wrong a couple times, losing my leaderboard, my number one spot on the leaderboard. So I'm going to go series split MVP, Joey Meneses. I believe he was the series MVP last time they played each other. I think he might get a couple home runs and driving some big runs for the Nats. I hope to be proven wrong, but that's my prediction. All right. As we're ending things off, the Marlins have a 4-game set against the Nationals. That's going to do it here. Make sure to check us out on Twitter, YouTube, everywhere you follow us. For myself, Daniel, Eli, Nick, Mike, Anthony, this is FOF Live presented by La Pop. As always, go fish.